Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Dr. Lynn Potvin, and I'm a naturopathic doctor in private practice in Maine. A huge part of my practice is helping young families and women manage their health naturally with nutrition and herbal medicines and diet and lifestyle changes. And a huge part of my practice, as you can imagine, is stress management. So I'm really happy to be able to speak with you all today, and I look forward to answering your questions. We're really going to be talking mostly about work-life balance today, and interestingly enough, whether or not that is actually a realistic endeavor, and what are some of the most successful strategies that I use in my practice to help people be healthy, even when their lives are incredibly busy and they kind of consistently have a certain level of stress following them wherever they go. One of the biggest questions I have in practice is there such a thing as work-life balance? And I think that this is a tough question because, as many of you are fully aware, when you're working but also trying to manage a family and manage all the rest of your social obligations, it's sometimes pretty hard to feel like there is such a thing. So what I highly encourage my patients in practice is not to, dwell on the idea of finding that perfect balance as much as finding a centered place. Because realistically, there's always going to be stress in our lives. There's always going to be situations that make it difficult for us to take care of ourselves on a personal level. But how do you integrate preventative care and stress management into your life in a realistic way so that you can stay fortified and resilient in the face of the stress that's inevitably going to be there? Oftentimes what I see is that there is a certain amount of guilt that particularly working women will feel if they don't have this picture perfect work-life balance situation set up and kind of consistently there. So again, probably the more realistic approach, I think, to stress management is setting yourself up so that you can be centered as opposed to balanced. So you can be ready when the storms hit and not feel like you're always, moving from one end of the teeter-totter to the other. So these are some of the biggest and most successful strategies and also the simplest strategies that I use with my patients in practice. And as you can see from the list and from the description of them as we go through them, is that they're not very high tech. They're pretty simple strategies. And what I like about them too is that they also can be fairly easily integrated into schedules that are even, I would say, inconsistent. Especially if your schedule isn't necessarily the same every day. These can be helpful in those situations, and in fact, might add a little consistency, much needed consistency to a schedule. So we're going to be looking at blood sugar, looking at the importance of breathing exercises and focusing on the breath. We're also going to talk a little bit about the art of saying no in its simplest terms. I know this is something that's really hard for women, particularly in the workplace. There are certain hydrotherapy techniques that I find to be incredibly helpful, and for those of you that aren't familiar with hydrotherapy, we will chat about that in just a couple minutes. But also, I'm going to end with chatting just a little bit about using emotion as a strength. I think oftentimes females in the workforce, in the corporate world, are not necessarily encouraged to use their emotional intelligence as a strength. But particularly when you're in management positions, it truly can be. So how do you kind of harness your emotional intelligence and use it as a strength, as opposed to tucking it away and kind of letting it fester. Because when we don't express our emotions appropriately, or let them shove them aside, rather, that's also a way that our body can become stressed out and our mind can become stressed out. So the first action step, one of the first things that I always approach with patients, is how to keep your blood sugar regular. One connection we don't make between is that connection between our mood and whether or not our blood sugar is regular. I'm sure all of you have experienced this, and if you have not, you probably have had children or know children that will very strongly express this. When they don't eat, or they miss a snack, or they miss a meal, they will inevitably get hangry, as we say. So hungry that they cannot even control an outburst or control their emotions. And, we're all, as adults, pretty similar in many ways to children, and will respond the same way. So, when people do not eat regularly, or eat in a way that allows their blood sugar to stay regular, that can really lead to mood swings, anxiety, depression, even compulsive behaviors. All of these are very strongly related to irregularity in blood sugar. So one of the most important things I have people do is try some very basic strategies, particularly food combining, to help them keep their blood sugar even throughout the day, so they don't, step onto that roller coaster, ups and downs in blood sugar. So what typically happens is people will eat a really high carb breakfast, something like a muffin, refined carbs, something like a bread or a pasta or something like that. And that kind of meal or that kind of snack will cause a really large spike in your blood sugar and insulin. Now remember, what goes up must come down. So just as high a spike as you will have a equal and just as devastating crash. That's why people will, get super tired in the afternoon, and that's part of the reason why if you have, a pasta meal at lunch, you'll find that a couple hours later you're ready to crawl under the covers. It's because you're having a low just as much as you had a high 2 hours earlier. Now, how do you prevent that? Well, I don't think it's necessarily a convenient option to cut out carbs altogether, and we do need carbohydrates in our diet to a certain extent. So, one of the solutions that I have for people is that anytime you have a carbohydrate snack or a meal, you just make sure to combine it with something that will slow down how fast you absorb that carbohydrate into the bloodstream. Now, the things that do that most effectively are proteins, so things like meat, eggs, higher protein yogurts, cheeses. There are vegan and vegetarian proteins, plant-based proteins as well. Oils, so things like olive oil, coconut oil, fish oil, as well as fiber. So we have fiber in vegetables and fruits, obviously, but also in whole grains. If you combine a carbohydrate with a protein, an oil, or a fiber, that's going to slow down that spike, which is great. So I always recommend that if you're going to have some sort of carbohydrate, make sure that you are food combining to keep your blood sugar more even. Now, sometimes it's harder, if your schedule is inconsistent during the day, it's hard to get in your meals at I would say regular times. And one of the biggest reasons why people will have these crashes in blood sugar is because they're not prepared for that. They either don't have a meal prepared or they don't have a snack prepared. So one of the best things that you can do is always keep snacks handy. And probably the most appropriate snacks to use would be something that's high in protein and oil. So nuts are really great for that. I always recommend that people keep nuts and seeds. What you can do, this is one of my favorite things to do on, a weekend evening, is prepare all of my week snack bags on a single night. I also do that with my meals. And if you have, little bags of almonds or walnuts kind of stashed all over the place, you can be a bit of a squirrel. That's what I do. I keep them in my purse. I keep them in my car. I keep them in my desk at my office. If you have them handy, there's less of a chance that you're going to be left with nothing and be at risk of having a huge drop in blood sugar, which will affect your mood and your ability to kind of manage things for the rest of the day. So don't be afraid to be a squirrel. Keep your snacks handy. Make sure that they're high in protein and oils. Things like muffins and more carby snacks like that may not be as helpful because, again, you'll end up with that huge spike and drop, which can just as effectively or just as much as a carby meal make you have that irregularity in blood sugar. Another thing that you can do if you want to avoid having to snack altogether is add things like oils to your meals. So olive oil and coconut oil, you can throw those into your salads or whatever you bring for lunch. Or, if you're eating out, you can add additional oils into the meal. And what this does is it sustains you for longer, keeps your blood sugar more even, but also makes you feel more full. And, I think that oils get a bad rap, but in reality, they're actually very healthy for you if you're eating good oils. So probably the biggest takeaway is keep your blood sugar even by making sure you get plenty of protein and oil and fiber in with your carbs. Keep your snacks handy, and make sure that you have a lot of nutrient density in your meals. So things like oils and fibers. Now the second action step is a little bit more intrinsic. When we're stressed out, one of the biggest things that you'll probably notice is that you're not breathing very deeply. We tend to breathe more shallow. And if we have a fairly stressed out existence and we're breathing shallow all the time, our structure will definitely conform to that. So our body will actually forget how to breathe deeply. So you have to remind it, when you take a very deep breath, you stretch the diaphragm out, and this actually reduces cortisol. Cortisol is your stress hormone. So by practicing deep breathing, you actually will reduce your physiological stress response. And this is really excellent to do at any time. I recommend breathing exercises any time of the day. Can be really great before bed if you have a hard time sleeping. And one of my favorite ones to recommend, because it's very easy to do. You don't have to twist yourself into some sort of weird yoga pretzel to get it done. And nobody will know that you're doing it because you're not blocking nostrils or doing any of that, kind of weird stuff. All you need to remember are the numbers 4, 7, and 8. So what you do is you inhale on a count of 4. You hold that breath for a count of 7 seconds, and then you exhale on a count of 8 seconds. And you can do, I would recommend doing about 3 or 4 cycles of that, but you can do it at any time. You can do it in the car, you can do it before bed, you can do it when you're in a pretty stressful interaction with an employee or with a customer. Nobody will know that you're regulating your breathing, but I can guarantee that it will actually help diffuse you in probably some of the more stressful interactions that you have. And a lot of my patients find this to be incredibly helpful. The third action suggestion or action step, the art of saying no. Again, like I mentioned before, as women in the workplace, it's difficult sometimes, particularly when there are there's a lot of work to get done. Women, on average, kind of get tasks unloaded onto them that maybe not be part of their job description. So it's hard in those situations, particularly if you do have the skills, you are capable of doing certain things. to say no. And so saying no is actually something you need to practice. And over time, you will be able to say no to things that, probably are taking more of your time and causing more stress. So I have people start with an exercise of picking some of the smallest things that they can think of that maybe they would just let slide. So, for example, you're riding in the car with your coworkers or with your family, and a radio show comes on the radio, or a song comes on the radio, and you really don't like that song or that radio show. Now, you may just kind of, grit your teeth and listen to it because everybody else wants to listen to it. But I would challenge all of you to turn the radio off or turn the song off, because at the end of the day, you don't have to listen to it, and you're well within your rights to say no and turn it off. And it may sound kind of silly, but for a lot of women, even making those really small decisions or perceived small decisions to say no to something can be really hard and really increase anxiety for them. So start small with those kinds of things, in the workplace but also with your family. And what I see over time with women is that the more they're able to say no to the small things that really nobody would get upset at them about, the easier it gets for them to really take a chunk of things off of their plate over time that may not seem like a big deal, but when they're all lumped together can be a huge burden to their time and to their energy. So start small, work your way up. And sometimes, we have family obligations, we have work obligations. Your time and your energy will get, taken away from you, but you can willingly allow people to borrow it. But what I see is that oftentimes this can cause resentment to build up over time if people are not willingly lending it out. So I always recommend to people that they can allow others to borrow their time and their energy, and when they've given it away, they have the power at the end of that situation to pause and, in their mind's eye or in their brain, take it back. I find that visualization can be really helpful for women in these situations, but saying silently to yourself or visualizing taking back your energy from a stressful interaction with an employee, or maybe a task that you didn't necessarily want to do, but you had to do it anyway. Taking time afterward to just take your energy back from that situation can, over time, be helpful in keeping you from getting drained. And I know that sounds, it may sound a little fluffy, but I see it work often with women that if they're conscious about where they're giving their energy away and when they're taking it back, it can really allow them to sustain their energy longer over a period of time. Now, to kind of get back to the physical level, to the body, hydrotherapy is essentially just using hot and cold water on the body to get your circulation going. And this can be really helpful at regulating your immune function and supporting your adrenal glands, which are the little glands sitting on top of your kidneys that produce your stress hormones. One of my favorites to recommend that a lot of patients really enjoy are contrast showers. And I swear these are better than a shot of espresso. They sound like a terrible form of torture, but I find that people are usually shocked a little bit by the first one, but then they really start to like them. And doing them consistently can be really great, again, for keeping your immune function up and supporting your adrenal glands. Another additional benefit of doing contrast showers is that doing the contrast actually reminds your body and your metabolism how to function. So when people tend to have, stubborn weight gain or difficulties losing weight, doing contrast showers consistently over a period of time can be really helpful at supporting your metabolism. So for a contrast shower, you do 1.5 minutes a hot shower, 30 seconds as cold as you can get it, and you do 3 cycles of that. You end on the cold. Give yourself a nice friction rub all over with your towel, and that's a contrast shower. So it sounds a little wild, but again, I find that people, when they do them for a few weeks, really notice that their energy goes up, their immune system functions better, and it really just kind of gets their metabolism going in a way that other things didn't necessarily do. Now the final action step, or things that I discuss with my patients and suggest with them for stress management, is really embracing their emotional self as a strength. Again, for women, particularly women that are working outside of the home, that have, a multitude of obligations, and oftentimes out in the public sector, are not necessarily encouraged to use their emotional self as a strength. But I think that what we're starting to understand now about women's leadership style is that their emotional intelligence and their ability to build connections within teams is truly a unique leadership style and absolutely a strength. And when we recognize our emotional selves, it allows us to be able to respond to situations versus reacting. When we manage our stress over time, that allows us to, again, stay anchored in that storm and allow us to, focus our emotions in a constructive way as opposed to reacting. So it takes practice and also requires that you be a little bit more introspective about your emotional responses in certain situations. But I think when you use your emotional self as a way to connect to your employees and connect with customers, it can be really helpful in resolving conflict and allowing for customer satisfaction. So again, our emotional selves are a strength and shouldn't necessarily be tucked away. One of the best ways I've found for people to exercise this is by doing what I call a gratitude exercise. And this literally takes 30 seconds to a minute to do. So an example that I can give is that imagine you have to go and resolve an issue with a customer that's perhaps dissatisfied with a system in the store. They may be things may be escalating between them and an employee, and you have to, manage it and diffuse it in some way. In those situations, taking 30 seconds to a minute to, in your mind, express gratitude for that situation, as hard as it may be, because you may certainly not be grateful for having to deal with a argument in the store. But if you can spin it in a way that allows you to be grateful for the opportunity. For example, if you're going to diffuse, a situation between an employee and a customer, you could say in your head that you are grateful for the opportunity to improve upon the systems in place in your store, because this is allowing you and everyone else at the store to really, assess or understand whether or not it is an appropriate system. So being grateful for the opportunity to really examine and improve upon the store's performance is something that you can kind of envision in your brain before you start talking to this customer. And I will tell you, I've had so many people tell me how life-altering this has been for them, because not only will you feel different going into that interaction, but the customer in this situation will feel that before you even approach them. They will sense that you aren't going into this situation on the defensive, and it can make a huge difference. It will change every interaction and every stressful event. Now, it takes practice. It's not every situation that we can just willingly go into it with gratitude, but it can be really, really helpful, and I challenge all of you to give it a try. So in closing, again, some of these things do take practice, but they can kind of be woven into a variety of situations, not only in work, but also in your family life and in your social situations. So just remember to breathe, remember to eat, remember to pause, and remember that you are, that while it may take practice, you can have opportunities to say no and grab those opportunities and run with them, because preserving your own energy and managing your stress is so hugely important for your ability to work with others and to help others, and really just important for your own health and well-being. So thank you so much for allowing me to talk to you about some of these strategies I use in practice, and I look forward to answering all of your questions.